In the heart of West Africa lies a land both rich in history and scarred by struggle, Burkina Faso. For decades, the people of this small nation have carried the heavy weight of poverty, terrorism, and exploitation. But whenever the story of Burkina Faso is told, one name echoes across time like thunder: Thomas Sankara. Sankara, often called the African Che Guevara, was the young, fiery leader of Burkina Faso in the 1980s. He spoke of dignity, independence, and African unity. He rode bicycles instead of limousines, banned corruption, encouraged women's rights, and told his people they could build their nation without bowing to foreign masters. He gave hope to a generation, but his life was cut short by assassination in 1987. For years, people whispered his name like a dream that ended too soon. But then, decades later, another young soldier stepped into the spotlight. His name? Ibrahim Traoré. When Traoré emerged in 2022, leading a coup at the age of just 34, the world was stunned. Suddenly, news channels across Africa and beyond were talking about the youngest president in the world. But in Burkina Faso, the people said something different. They said, Sankara has returned. Why? Because Traoré was not like the leaders they had grown used to. Men in expensive suits, sitting in air-conditioned offices, cutting deals with foreign powers. No. He wore simple military fatigues. He stood tall in dusty streets, surrounded not by businessmen, but by ordinary soldiers. He spoke of reclaiming Burkina Faso's resources, of giving the country back to its people, of rejecting the long hand of foreign exploitation. Every word reminded the people of Sankara. Every gesture echoed the past. It felt as if history, after years of silence, had found its voice again. Ibrahim Traoré was not the son of a millionaire, nor a man who had studied in palaces of the West. He was a soldier, born from the soil of the nation itself. In the dusty villages and fields of Burkina Faso, he saw firsthand the hardships of his people. Families displaced by terrorist attacks, farmers working endlessly, yet staying poor, children walking miles for water, young men forced to leave their homeland in search of survival. Unlike politicians who looked away, he carried these images in his heart. And when the nation's leadership failed, when the government could not protect its people from endless terrorist attacks, he stepped forward, not because he wanted power, but because his people demanded change. It was this raw courage, this willingness to risk everything, that reminded the older generation of their beloved Sankara. On a morning in September 2022, most of the world had never heard of Ibrahim Traoré. By evening, his name was trending across Africa. Soldiers loyal to him marched into the capital, Ouagadougou. Within hours, power shifted, the old leadership crumbled, and out of the dust and chaos rose this young man, barely in his 30s, standing before microphones with a calm yet firm voice. He declared that the time of betrayal was over, that Burkina Faso would stand tall again, that terrorism would be fought with strength, and that the resources of the nation would no longer be drained by outsiders. It was not just a coup. It was a statement, a declaration that the people's patience had run out. The comparisons to Thomas Sankara came naturally. Both were young soldiers. Both rose during times of crisis. Both spoke of dignity, independence, and African unity. Sankara had once declared, "He who feeds you controls you." Traoré echoed this by demanding that Burkina Faso rely on its own strength rather than the endless aid and interference of foreign powers. Sankara had once said, "You cannot carry out fundamental change without a certain amount of madness." Traoré's boldness at such a young age felt like that very madness, the kind that inspires revolutions. Suddenly, murals of Traoré appeared in villages and towns. Young Africans across the continent began sharing his speeches on social media. For them, he was not just a president. He was proof that courage still existed in a world of compromise. What made him even more respected was his humility. While many African presidents surrounded themselves with luxury, Traoré kept his soldier's boots on. He ate with his men. He wore the same uniform. He chose not to separate himself from the common people. In a world where power often corrupts, this simplicity stood out like a beacon. It made people trust him. It made them believe that perhaps finally they had found a leader who cared more about the nation than about himself. Of course, Ibrahim Traoré's journey is far from easy. Burkina Faso is still fighting deadly terrorist groups. Poverty remains widespread. Powerful nations still look at its gold and resources with greedy eyes. But in the face of all these challenges, Traoré carries himself with the fire of a man on a mission. He knows that the path will be hard, but he also knows that Burkina Faso has walked in darkness for too long, and someone must light the torch. And so every day, he tries to balance the heavy burden of leadership with the hopes of millions. Every step he takes feels like a step on the path Sankara once walked. What makes Traoré's story viral is not just Burkina Faso. It is the fact that across Africa, young people see themselves in him. They see a leader who is not old, not corrupt, not controlled by foreign powers. They see a man who could be their brother, their cousin, their neighbor, someone who rose from ordinary soil to extraordinary heights. For them, Ibrahim Traoré represents a dream that Africa can stand tall, free, and proud, that leaders can be humble, honest, and brave, that Sankara's vision, though buried for decades, can still live on. And so, on the streets of Ouagadougou, when people chant his name, it feels like two names are being spoken at once: Traoré and Sankara. One alive, one gone. One past, one present. But together, they form a single story of resistance, dignity, and courage. Perhaps that is why people call him the man who brought back Sankara's spirit. Because in Ibrahim Traoré, they see not just a president, but the continuation of a dream that refuses to die. And so the story of Ibrahim Traoré spreads across Africa and the world. A story of a soldier who rose when his people cried for help. A story of a leader who refused corruption and chose humility. A story of a young man who carried the spirit of a legend into a new age. Burkina Faso may be small, but its message is mighty. And through Ibrahim Traoré, the spirit of Sankara breathes again. So if you believe that courage, honesty, and independence can still inspire change, share this story. Because sometimes history does not end, it simply finds a new face. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories that the world needs to hear.